Welcome to another episode of Five Things. And on this episode, we're going to talk about something that's pretty popular out there to all types of fans, horror lovers, casual fans. Everybody knows about creature features. And we're going to be talking about the five creature feature films that you should check out. And with me today is my lovely co-host, Chetty himself, Charlie Johnston.
Yeah! Yeah! Said nobody ever.
Let's dive into some history on creature features.
I am inevitable.
Throughout the 1960s and up until the 90s, back during a time where we saw dedicated time slots for movie variety shows that featured some horror hosts like Dr. Creep, Elvira, and Joe Bob Briggs. Every Friday and every Saturday evening, we were treated with creature feature showcases. They started with throwbacks to cult horror films dating back to the 30s that normally centered around the Universal monsters, but quickly expanded and began including some RKO films like King Kong and Son of Kong. Then there were some Japanese monster films like Godzilla and Gamera. Then, of course, we started seeing some Roger Corman films like The Terror and the Raven. Today, you can still find some of these broadcasts in some cities or on social media, like The Mummy and the Monkey every Friday night on Facebook. Definitely go check them out. Now, while the variety shows may have died, it is important to note that movie monsters have not. And while on screen, movie monsters have been around since 1915 with the movie Gollum and up until the most recent film, Antlers. Monsters have been a part of our culture for far longer in literature and in urban legends that were passed around fires. We are ready to kick things off, and a returning guest, fellow nerd boxer, DonnaJean Phillips.
Woo!
Hey, Dave. Hey, Charlie. Hey, everybody. And I am wearing my Deadly Grounds shirt. So, buy Deadly Grounds. Be awesome.
Oh, I love Deadly Grounds. I actually just put in an order for them, and I know they're not sponsoring this video, but it is good stuff.
I'm saying it right now. That is the best decaf coffee I've ever had in my life.
All right. So, Donna, anything that you want to plug before we jump into things?
I am really, really excited about a couple of films that are coming out. Stream that has been talked about by Nerdbox. So if anybody has a chance to check out the Indiegogo, I think it's still like kind of on the expanded Indiegogo stream. So to all of the show goes out there, Dave and I started out doing this because we go to shows and we love it and we love you guys. So thank you.
All right, I'll plug a show for you. So DonnaJean has a spin-off show of the Coffee House of Horror, and that is A Shot of Espresso, which are smaller clips of interviews and special topics. Like in October, we did everybody's favorite Halloween memory, and in March, it's going to be ghost stories.
Now on to the important stuff. Our top 5 creature features that you'd recommend to somebody. As per usual, the name of the game is 5 things. We always start with our guest, kind of a round table thing, even though it's on the screen. So Donna, without further ado, give us your number 5.
This was so hard because when we are talking about creatures, we're talking about monsters, we're talking about ghosts, we're talking about just such a huge category. Number 5 for me was The Pale Man from Pan's Labyrinth. Pan's Labyrinth was a 2006 film directed by Guillermo del Toro. This creature is played by one of my favorite creature actors, Doug Jones. Doug has been in so many things. I mean, you would know him from Hellboy. You would know him from, he actually played a number of different characters on this. He's just everywhere. And the Pale Man was terrifying. He had no eyes on his face. He was completely pale and white. He had eyes on his hands, and he would follow the noise with his hands. And he had in the corner of his lair was a large pile of children's clothing, which led you to believe that that was from children that had been in there that did not make it out alive. And Ophelia, I believe, the little girl, had a task to go in and retrieve something from his lair. And he was only in one scene. But when I think about Pan's Labyrinth, I think about the Pale Man because he's so terrifying. And I'm not sure what he is, but he's terrifying.
That is a good pick. Now, I'm not a fan of that movie, but the character is great. And I don't think I made it through it awake, so I'll have to revisit it. But anytime I think about that movie, it's the Pale Man because it's just an awesome looking character.
That's a good number 5. That's a pretty good one. Maybe I should go back and watch that again.
I think I have to do that too.
I kind of think that it deserves it. It's too smart. It's also a smart movie.
The practical effects of this. Doug Jones playing the Pale Man, he plays these creatures. It's himself. It's not anything against the CGI because there is a time and a place for that. But there's also a time and a place for the practical effects of somebody being in that suit with that makeup that can just bring that to life.
My number 5, I'm going to take the opportunity to throw one out there that I've never seen, but it's been recommended to me, but I've never seen it, and it's a travesty. I'm actually really ashamed of it. The Thing. It's so relevant in pop culture that I feel like I've seen enough of the clips and the especially of the monster and all that kind of stuff that I'm like, that's got to be on the list. Just to pay respect, where it's due. And it is speaking of practical effects, that's the one where I always lean back on it. And I'm like, you want to scare the crap out of, you want to have an unsettling feeling, watch that movie because that is grotesque at the end.
Yep.
And it leaves you not knowing.
You watch the countdown shows and all that kind of stuff, and they like to show that one where the creature kind of the fire is there, and the creature stands up, and it's this huge, humanoid, mushy, gooey,
and his head falls off, and it turns into a spider.
Yeah.
Such amazing.
I love that scene. It's the head spider scene.
It's wet, and wet things are gross, and it works so well for that monster. And again, you can't. Look at me. I've never even seen the movie, and I'm talking about it. That's how important that kind of creature is. So that's my number 5.
1954's Gillman, Creature from the Black Lagoon. The things they did with that suit in that time period, swimming underwater with it, he doesn't get as much, I think, recognition as maybe the Wolfman and Frankenstein, and he hasn't shown up in film time and time again, but such a great character. And just to have something, swimming in the water, making you afraid to go into the lake, pre-Jaws too. So
yeah, exactly.
You could see the gills flapping when he was breathing. It was just amazing for that time period. Such a great costume, such a great creature.
Well done. I agree that belongs on the list. Especially we're starting out, with creature feature. And when I was growing up, my dad used to play drive-in movie. I was really little. He would put a blanket down on the living room and we would watch creature feature. And I very specifically remember seeing the Creature from the Black Lagoon and the Invisible Man, and they kind of sort of fall by the wayside by some of the other monsters that have gotten other lives.
It gave me anxiety. The thought, it didn't even occur to me in those old movies that this guy was underwater in this mask that's super, it's on his face. Yep. It's there. And I'm like, it's amazing that you didn't die from that, or because you hear those kind of darker stories from way back in the day when they were first doing this stuff and all this was new, that stunts went wrong pretty frequently.
But the Jeepers Creepers, dude. He's an ancient demonic creature who feeds on human beings for 23 days every 23rd spring. and he was portrayed by Jonathan Breck, and he was portrayed by Jonathan Breck in, I think, all three of the films. And, you know, not to focus on the films, but the creature, the creature is terrifying. And
Yeah.
in fact, I hate that movie because it is so creepy.
Like that scene at the end where he's got, is it Justin Long? That's his name?
Justin Long, yeah.
Justin Long. He has his eyes and he's looking, and I was like, again, the unsettling feeling of like, oh, like it's just the worst. All right, my number 4. This is where I'm gonna do it a little early, Dave. I'm gonna sneak Medusa in. I think that these two movies are responsible for a trend that is hit or miss right now, a resurgence of a trend that is hit or miss right now. But the fun thing is that it brings back the conversation of a genre of movie that really was dormant for a while, and that's Cloverfield / Godzilla. Now, Godzilla, I threw it in there because he had a resurgence after the Cloverfield stuff, but there's the history, and people have their favorites and all that kind of stuff. Cloverfield was really, to be fair, was the actual choice. I didn't want to just do kaiju movies. I liked the idea that this was a low-grade, hand cam sort of thing, and I thought the concept of the monster was really original. And then the other thing about it was the little creepy crawly things towards the middle of the movie that jump off them, the parasites, that whole deal. And the marketing for that movie was spectacular.
Yes.
You know, and the idea to the point to where like there was websites and this stuff. And I love how the franchise is not guaranteeing anything going forward with it. Like I remember one of the biggest things was like the rumor that like what was the last line of the movie was like, that's just the baby. And it was like,
right.
Oh, what's the big? And I personally remember like going on the internet and like, what's the concept art for the big one and whatever. And it was this giant, like kind of Cthulhu looking like blue whale thing with a huge tail and legs. And it was like, and it kind of never happened, but it like added so much to the lore of the creature. And I really do think it kind of jump started that genre again. Pacific Rim and like I said, Godzilla and Kong and all that kind of stuff happened. And one other quick thing is, and Godzilla stole from this movie, back to the hand cam model, was the first person perspective of being on a ground level while something's tearing through New York City.
Yeah,
that was one of the things. That was one of the things that sold me on when they did the Godzilla reboot, the Bryan Cranston one. I remember the trailer for that. You don't really see Godzilla in the whole thing. If I recall the trailer correctly, it was like a closing garage or something like that. And from, again, ground level, you're looking up and there's this like, 200 foot tall, 300 foot tall, whatever monster. And you're like, that's such an interesting take. It was always off to the side watching the monster destroy the city. Never what's it like to be a human in the situation.
It was more personal. Like this is you doing it.
Yes, exactly. And again, the history of Godzilla, I'm certainly not taking anything away from the movies going back, but just like how can you not mention like kaijus in general, but like the one like Godzilla, well, he is like arguably I would say maybe the most lucrative creature of all of them. Is that possible? Maybe
the king of the monsters. That's the
monsters, right? Yeah.
Probably the second best marketing to Blair Witch when it came to a film, because everybody was talking about it. Statue of Liberty's head just rolling down the street. It's like, oh my God. Number 4, I saw this in the theater as a kid. It is the right time of year to be watching it. It is Gremlins.
Yes.
I could never argue Gremlins being on the list. It's fun. It's horror.
Yeah, it's the best Christmas horror movie ever made. The little gremlins and the Gizmo and Mogwais.
Yeah. Any love for the second one?
Great creatures in that too. The spider gremlin, amazing.
Yes.
Terrifying. Yes.
Remember the one that got injected with like the human DNA, and he ended up on like a talk show at one point. He could like he sang Frank Sinatra at the end of the movie. Like it's totally bonkers and pointless, but it's so good. Oh, it's so good.
My number 3 is actually Louise, who is played by Nadia Hilker in Spring. And it's like a beautiful love story, but she keeps turning into this, like, you don't actually see it. You'll see like tentacles, and then she'll go running off, and you'll see she'll be there, and there'll be a cat there, and all of a sudden, like, you hear a flurry, and the cat's no longer there, and she's like back to herself. In my mind, in my experience, I haven't seen a film that there's another creature like her. And it's this beautiful love story between these two. And she turns into a creature and goes and has to eat somebody, you know?
Because I can't, and because Dave's got me on a short leash where I'm only allowed to have one koozie every list until I have more than that, I decided to consolidate, did one of these, and I chose Monster Squad. I think that movie by itself, this campy little like 80s high school kid figuring they did that thing that 80s movies do, but then they paid a lot of respect to this genre and these characters. Like, it, just for whatever it's worth, they did more justice to the characters, the monsters in that movie, than I think most of the current iterations that even Universal tried to do. You know what I mean? 1985, 6, whatever year it was, you got this movie that I think the budget was like $4 and a pack of Bazooka Joe. And they kind of killed it. And they went into the lore. Like, Van Helsing is the guy fighting Dracula, you know? And little things like the old German guy, he was a Holocaust survivor. I never even picked up on that until I watched it now, and they do this close up of the numbers on his wrist and like that kind of stuff and whatever. And I'm like, this movie's like a little heavy to a degree, like with certain things. And anyway, back to the creatures, like Gilman specifically. That is, I thought, as far as an update goes, that was great. Yep. I thought Wolfman, again, the natural progression of things, like they took 80s prosthetic technology, if you want to call it that, that's what I'm going to call it. Wolfman was great. Dracula didn't look like Bela Lugosi, but it was good enough. Frankenstein's monster looked awesome. I always thought the scene with the mummy is great when, he ties the arrow, shoots it at a tree, and just,
The guy who played the mummy was the guy who couldn't breathe in Insidious 3, best part of that film, but he was also Jason Stryker in X-Men 2. He was the kid in the wheelchair.
Really?
Yes. I'm not going to dive into Monster Squad because if people want to hear our thoughts on Monster Squad and there being a reboot, go watch the Halloween special or watch our cutscene on Monster Squad. But great pick.
Yeah, no,
I have to watch that again. I haven't seen that in a while. I'm going to have to watch that again.
Well, Charlie's just picking the things off of my list here, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but my number 3 is Godzilla. Particularly from 2001 GMK, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, because he looked the most menacing in that film. He had white eyes. He was a badass in the movie. He fought all the other monsters that were trying to stop him. Great film. And I just wanted to add to what Charlie was mentioning before with Godzilla. Been around since the 50s, right? Yep. And even though crappy ass reboot the first time came out with Broderick, he has stayed in pop culture, kids' hearts and minds ever since, right? The Japanese movies still come out. The toys are still here. Godzilla is definitely the king of the monsters.
I always kind of like the Japanese and American sort of battle there is with the Godzilla property. Like, as soon as Godzilla, what year was that? Was 2016 with Cranston, 15, whatever year it was. But that was, as soon as that one came out, like within the year, Japan turns around and they came out with that next Godzilla where he was like, they purposely like made him like double the height, red fins going up the back. He had this like angry like thing going on where they made him like really nasty looking. Like, it looked like Japanese Godzilla because there's like kind of an aesthetic to that. but it was like they made him kind of as gnarly as they really sort of could, and it was just like this whole like, oh, you think yours is good? Well, watch this. Try
I
that.
have to admit, my history of Godzilla is that my brother has always loved Godzilla. He and his wife, before their baby was born, who is now like 18, his wife had little angels on one side of the room, and he had Godzillas and monsters and like a Chucky doll on the other side of the room. And so my husband and I were at a comic book store a couple of years ago and got him a bunch of Godzilla comics. So whenever I think of Godzilla, it is lovingly thinking of my brother. So I love you, Glenn. Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead is just one of my forever, like, favorite movies. That movie is so intense. Lance Henriksen is amazing in it. Tom Woodruff Jr. is amazing in it. And the fact that it also has an ethical story. First, it starts out terrifying that a young Ed Harley as a child is looking outside and seeing the Pumpkinhead creature like kill someone. And then it turns out later his child is accidentally killed. And he goes to this old scary witch and and she says, you know, I can't bring the dead back, Ed Harley, in her 1,000-year-old lady voice. And he's like, no, I just want revenge. So of course, Pumpkinhead grows out of this body he takes out of this pumpkin patch. And he's terrifying.
Yeah, it's one of the last creature features that actually creeped me out, because not only just how he looked, which was absolutely stunning, and how big he was, but he always had that sound that came with him too, like that insect sound.
I gotta check that one out. That was one that for 2 reasons, I sort of avoided, because number one, the monster, whenever it scared the absolute shit out of me. It just, I do remember that. And I just kind of always assumed it was like a Halloween knockoff, just based on the title.
Right. Well, yeah, the whole Pumpkinhead thing comes from the fact that the dead body that turns into the Pumpkinhead is gotten out of an old cemetery, like a pumpkin patch.
So my number 2 is already mentioned. We don't got to go into great detail, because Dave already mentioned it, the Gremlins. Gremlins is great, top to bottom. The story is solid. I think the data's one of my favorite things too, just to remove from the creature part for a second. The dad. He is unsung in the whole thing. What an idiot. Like, then how easy is it to survive in 1983 or whatever, middle America, that you can be a failing inventor that just drives all over the country willingly? Who's paying the bills? I know the son works at the bank, like I get it, but that's a mortgage and 3 mouths to feed. With a dog, forget it. And then he just turns around and gets another pet, just like, oh, we're just gonna have to feed this one now too. And oh, by the way, here's an instruction manual. Here's my smokeless ashtray that doesn't work for shit. Just saying.
My number 2 has also been said, and I kind of called it out a little bit earlier. Now, this could swap easily with my number 1, and it's one of the 2 first horror movies I ever remember watching when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old when I first came onto TV, so it scarred me back then. And it's the Norris monster from The Thing. We already talked about it, you know, the spider head, him coming off the table, and wow, just the special effects for it. You know, I can go on and on about it, but we've talked about it. So, Yep, it's my number 2.
All right, folks, we've gotten into where we're at the home stretch here. This is the honorable mentions section. Donna, you have any honorable mentions for your creature features?
My honorable mentions are the crawlers from The Descent, because they deserve to be there on the list mentioned. And not surprisingly, I'm sure if you would know me, Samara from The Ring.
My honorable mentions, I'm really kind of surprised. Just again, with all the prosthetic stuff, like really, The Fly,
Yes.
Jurassic Park.
I agree. Yep.
I agree.
Those are monster movies. And the Alien series. Dave, honorable mentions.
Well, Xenomorphs are in there for me too. They just fell off the list. The Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolfman from the 50s, love it. And then my last one is Ants from the movie Them in the 1950s as well.
Hey, folks, we're in the home stretch. We're into the number 1s. Miss Donna, what do you got for number 1?
Well, both of you had it on your list. Mine was John Carpenter's The Thing. Is my number one. Anybody that knows me, if they ask, what's your favorite movie? If I'm only allowed to pick one, it's John Carpenter's The Thing. It's a good film. I love the actors. I've had the good fortune to meet a whole lot of them, not Kurt Russell, but Wilford Brimley a couple of times, and a number of the other actors, and they're all just will always be the members of the cast of The Thing to me, because that movie just impacted me so much.
Yeah.
So my number one, it's not just one movie, it's a whole series. It shouldn't be that surprising for anyone that knows me. It's about the only horror series that I'm like, I will watch every one of these movies no matter what. And Bruce Campbell can do no wrong. It's the Evil Dead series. I mean, like, and talk about, again, low grade, barely any budget, but did the most you could with what you had.
The first one was just really just scary. The second one started towards that touch of the humor, you know.
I'm kind of surprised that you guys didn't say it. Which creature am I talking about? Is it the prosthetic, obvious ones, the Deadites? Or, and then maybe I'm reading too much into it, is it the hand cam through the woods, the evil, you know what I mean? Like, you never see it.
Yeah.
But its effect is there. I mean, you don't know what it is. I assume it's a creature.
I'll have to say, when I saw this movie, that night I slept with a crucifix on my chest. And when I found out about the second one, I was like, nope. It's American Werewolf in London.
You know, that came very close to being an honorable mention for me. And honestly, if I would have thought about it again, it would have been. That is such a good film. It really is.
It is the greatest practical effects transformation of a werewolf ever made, and it'll probably never be replicated ever again, CGI or practical effects. You know, the story's good. You don't get much werewolf time in it, but when you do, the werewolf is scary. It looks like a rabid giant dog, the way it is. And it's just perfect for that time period, and it's very hard to compete with these days.
And then you got his friend, you know, who is deteriorating. That, and he that is so fun to see. Hey, David, stop it! I'm not talking to you. You're dead. You know, it just fun and scary.
Never saw it. Didn't they kind of do they tried to do a sort of remake where they did the reverse? Or American it was
Paris.
In Paris, that's what it was. And it had.
I never made my way through that movie.
All I remember is that it was the second attempt of a movie by the guy that plays Guy Patterson from That Thing You Do, the guy that played the drummer. And I don't know why that sticks out of my mind, because I love that movie so much. Not that it's horror related at all. It's just a fun movie. And then this was the next thing he did. And I don't know. I vaguely remember people being like, it's kind of a piece of shit. And specifically, it was the special effects that people had the biggest problem with.
With this too, the movie has a lot of scenes cut out to make it an R rating, or it's going to be an X rating for it, just for its graphic nature. And John Landis did Gremlins.
So now I have no excuses. Not that I had any excuses.
You've got a list of movies now to walk away with.
I have homework to do, but hey.
And I have one or two to rewatch because it's been a long time. So.
All right, folks, there you have it. That's our top five, in fact. Not just five, not any five. Our top 5 creature features that you should check out, that we would recommend to anybody to try. Make sure you go in the comments. Let us know what your top 5 are, if you agree, disagree, all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm going to really make it clear. I don't care what anybody thinks about the top 5 creatures, except for Miss Donna. She is the queen of this episode, and it is nothing but the loveliest experience to share a podcast with her. Dave, you're okay. Anyway, make sure you like, share, subscribe, follow all of the Nerd Box shows, and Miss Donna, you got anything you want to plug? You got some stuff?
I think you guys should let us know what are your top 5 too.
With that, it's been 5 things. I've been Charlie.
This is Dave.
I'm DonnaJean.
All right, everyone, be good.
Later.